Right, I'm doing a replacement for the pads on this Archie-Dag 9-keyed chanter. It has G sharps but not any F naturals. It's a nicely made chanter, but the holes in it are rather large, and it's been interestingly tricky to organise such that the keypads will actually fit. The method I use for fixing the keypads on is to actually use flake shellac and then melt it between the pad and the key. So we have a pad. This is actually an 8mm pad because the area around the hole at the top of the chanter is rather large, so we need to cover that. I would normally use a 6mm pad at the top end of a chanter, and between the key and the actual pad I use a flake of shellac. See if I can persuade it to pick up. And this is placed between the key and the pad, and then making sure that the pad is absolutely where I want it, which is central but leaning slightly towards the top because the hole is a bit elongated. And now this is the bit that I haven't seen anybody else do, although actually for me I've always done it all the time for the 40 years I've been making pipes, and I've never had a problem doing it. It has the advantage that the pad is moulded around the actual hole, and whatever the shape of the seat, the pad will conform to it, which gives you a very reliable and very easy seal. I suspect that people who don't know would suspect that applying heat is not a great idea, but actually it does no harm, and the heat never really reaches the wood at all. It's only the tip of the pad that actually gets hot. So I do this by placing, I've got a soldering iron plugged into the mains. I've actually got a little rheostat between the mains and this, so that I can actually run this at lower temperature than I would use it if I was using it for soldering. But the important thing is that it gets the tip of the pad up to enough temperature to melt the flake of shellac. And what I'm doing while I'm pressing down quite firmly, I'm looking to see at what point, there we go, the actual shellac starts to appear around the side of the end of the key. So I've now got a liquid shellac appearing around the side, and I keep the pressure on for long enough to make sure that it's all molten, it's all amalgamated, and then I can remove the heat. And I don't know whether you can see, but there's a little bubble of shellac on each side, so I know that the shellac has now flowed right across the actual key and on the floor. And so now that I'll give this a minute or two to cool down. I mean, it's now well cool enough that I can, it's now just vaguely warm. So now I gently open the key. There will be some element of sort of hairs that tend to stick to the surface, left from the oils and unguents that have been on this chanter in its history, because it's quite an old chanter. And there we go. And then give that a few up and downs. And then now's the time to actually clean the face and make sure that there we go. You can see that you get a few hairs from the leather left on the top. So clean those off. There we go. And then I don't know whether you can see, but the key now has really, I mean, it's a little bit furry, but that'll disappear when it's oiled. It has the shape of the hole and the seat around it embedded in the pad itself. So we'll now put that back on. actually before I put it on, I'll take the little bubbles of shellac off, and they're now quite brittle, and you can snap them off with just a fingernail. There we are, that's them gone. And then we'll put the key back. And lining up is always a bit of a lottery, but I've got this little 1mm piano wire with a sharpened end so that I can find the hole in the key quite easily. And then, having got it so it's now, the key is now located on it, just put it back from the hole a bit, and now I can put the pin in, and as I push the pin through, it'll push the little keeper thing out, if I get it right. So I'm being a bit clumsy, and introduce itself into the, there we are, so it's in the key, it's pushed that out, and so now the whole thing is back where it should be, and we have what should turn out to be a very good sealed pad. The material I use for my pads is also probably not widely used. I was given this by a friend who restores player pianos, and this is the material that is called pneumatic basil, and it's used for making the bellows that power elements of the player piano. It's reasonably airtight, quite flexible, it's quite soft. It's a form of sheepskin, possibly even lambskin, but it's soft, and it's treated in a way that keeps it soft. It has basically the outer skin side is the side on which I actually seal against the pad itself. So this is the side that has the shellac put on it, and the other side, it doesn't look very ideal, but it is actually perfect. It's slightly soft, but it's not fluffy. It's just a kind of soft surface, and that will mould to the seat, and it will retain oil, and it actually works very well as a pad. So these, I suspect, are probably close to what was traditionally used, and this is all I have of it. Actually, I was given this by the friend who restores the pianos, and I've been using it ever since. And as you can see from the holes in it, I've cut a lot of pads out of it, and it will probably do all the pads I'm ever going to use. So that's the material, pneumatic basil. No idea where you can get it from, but I have found it referenced online, so it's probably findable. But I would suspect that a good quality leather of similar sort of state, with a skin side that is like this, is fairly smooth and will take the shellac well, and a flesh side that is a little bit softer that will conform to the seat. So that's what I actually use. And the shellac I use, basically you can get it in bulk. I've got a small bottle of it here. What I do is I tip it out onto a plate so that I can choose the size of piece I'm going to use, and I mean there's a big bit there that I shall actually break up into probably 3, possibly 4 if I'm lucky. This piece I'll break in half. These are offcuts of pieces that I've already used. That's probably big enough for a small key, but I would probably put a second smaller piece along with it. You need it. It doesn't matter if you have too much, but it does matter if you have too little. If you have too much, it just comes out the side, and as long as you don't heat it for too long, it won't go anywhere. It just bubbles out the side and then hardens, and you flick it off. The other thing to note is that if you're using a soldering iron without any voltage reduction, which is how I've done it all of the time we've been making pipes up until today, when I've actually now used this. I got this actually for putting reed blocks into accordions, and because if you use it at soldering temperature, it just vaporizes the wax and it doesn't work properly. So I tried it here for the first time, and it does seem to work very well. But if you're using an ordinary soldering iron, if you keep it on too long, the pad will shrivel up before any damage is done to the wood. the pad just kind of shrinks away, and if you see that happen, you've kept it on too long and it's time to scratch that pad off and put a new one on. So that's the Mike Nelson method of putting pads onto Northumbrian pipe chanters. I've no idea whether it worked for other types of instruments, but it definitely works for me. I've done it for all of the sets I've made, and I have never had any problem with it. So thank you very much. This chanter is actually quite old, as I don't know if you can see, but the holes in it are actually quite elongated. The same is true under the key ends as well. And I don't know whether I'll be able to get it to play in tune with itself. It has a fairly major problem in that the G sharp, top G sharp, is actually very, very sharp. As you can see if you look at the side, it's almost opposite the A, whereas it ought to be about 2 or 3 millimeters further down the chanter to stand a chance of being in tune. And if it wasn't a historic chanter, I would probably try and alter the key. But as you can see, the B key is wrapped around it, so it is hard to move that. At the bottom of the chanter, easier to solve, is that the bottom G sharp is actually going to be very flat. You would expect it to be, it's currently kind of there, the centre of it's about there, but you'd really want it to be about here, about 5 millimeters further up. So it's probably going to be very flat. If it was a key that the player was really keen to use and to have it in tune, I would have to alter the key. I'm not terribly keen to alter the key because this is Archie Dagg's work, and it's very interesting work as well, in that the pads are silver soldered on with what looks like real silver. First time I've ever seen this. I don't do jewellery or anything, so I'm sure it works very well. I thought originally it was soft solder, and I was quite worried about the possibility of it melting when I put the pads on. But actually, it's real silver, and it is absolutely silver soldering in the true meaning of the word. So that's the Archie Dagg chanter. The property of Catherine Tickell. It's the chanter she played when she was a young girl, and is the root of her playing. So thank you very much for watching that. Hope I haven't bored anybody. Thank you very much and goodbye.